your attention first to the tweet the High Representative published a short while ago on Belarus, deploring the unacceptable and the unacceptable violence against the protesters, against the peaceful protesters. And he also flagged that he is working on an EU declaration on behalf of the whole European Union. That means that 27 EU member states are currently in discussions about the text of the declaration, and I think this declaration will bring a few answers to the questions which are raised currently about the situation in Belarus. What needs to be stressed is that Belarus and Belarusian people are partner of the European Union, and we are committed to develop this partnership with Belarusian people and with Belarus as a country. And that's why it is important to have elections as a process of democratic selection of the most appropriate leader who should represent this country in contacts with the European Union. But the whole range of issues related to the relations between the European Union and Belarus is currently under review due to the unfortunate events which were related to the presidential elections on Sunday. And the member states of the EU are currently assessing the situation. And as I said, the EU declaration is in the pipeline, and we will be able to discuss these aspects more in detail once the EU makes its position known on this.
Thanks. Next we have Mose.
Thank you, Vivian. Well, in fact, I had more or less the same question to Peter as the previous question. It's about the presidential elections in Belarus. And I'm not read the latest statement, but as you know, there were two statements, one before the elections and one on yesterday, I think. And what struck me was the things that, let's say, the statement yesterday said that it's essential that the Central Electoral Commission publishes the results reflecting the choice of Belarus people. And I suppose that there's no way for the Commission, let's say, to assess whether the counting will be accurate, because there were no, as you know, election observers. So I suppose that the regime will announce that the president got 80% of the votes, and we won't know if that is accurate. So the question is, what will be the Commission response? Or maybe we'll learn that a bit later. Thank you.
Thank you, Mose. Unfortunately, it was not possible for the usual election observation mission, international election observation mission by the OSCE ODIHR to come to Belarus and observe these elections. There were, however, domestic observers, domestic independent observers, and based on the information we are receiving and we are seeing so far, there are reasonable doubts about the accuracy of the election results which were announced by the Central Electoral Commission. That's why the call in the EU statements, various EU statements and statements by the EU member states which were issued also individually, to make sure that the choice, the real choice of the Belarusian people is reflected in these results. In other words, the authorities have to hear the voice of their people. They have to respect their fundamental rights, also in terms of having free and fair elections, and also in terms of respecting their fundamental rights and freedoms when it comes to the freedom of expression and freedom of assembly. And these are the main points of EU's calls and EU statements on Belarus, that it is unacceptable what we have seen in the course of the process, of the electoral process, the incredible harassment and repression against the candidates, against their teams, against the journalists, bloggers, activists, peaceful protesters, also in the aftermath of the voting. That's the level of violence, the brutal violence is unacceptable. We are condemning this violence. We are calling on Belarusian authorities to release all those who were detained unlawfully, based only on political grounds. And we are urging them to refrain from this violence. And as I mentioned, the EU member states are now working, or the High Representative is working on a joint declaration by the EU 27 member states to address all the issues in the situation in Belarus after the vote and the unfortunate events which were accompanying this vote and following this vote from the side of the Belarusian authorities. The people of Belarus deserve that their rights are respected and that their choices are heard.
Thanks. Richard, please.
Yeah, hello. Both maybe to you, Vivian, and to Peter. Have Mr. Borrell or Mrs. von der Leyen been in touch with their Belarusian counterparts, which I believe still is Mr. McKay, the foreign minister, and Mr. Lukashenko? Have they called them? And in the same time, have they reached out to Mrs. Tikhanovskaya, which I believe now has fled to Lithuania? So have you been in touch with her as well? And have you been in touch with Lithuanian authorities to check on her?
Thank you, Ricard. The EU and the member states are, of course, watching the unfolding situation very, very thoroughly and very closely. And based on our assessment of the situation, which includes also contacts with a number of partners, we will decide about the next steps, about EU's response and also the further shape of our relations with Belarus. I would not go into the details on specifying which contacts have been made, are made, or are scheduled to be made, because this is an ongoing effort. And as I said, diplomacy is not really always conducted in the public domain with ongoing commentary on every single outreach. So there is a number of contacts which have been made, or are being planned, and this will all feed into the ongoing considerations and consultations and discussions and assessments about EU's response to what is going on in Belarus.
Thanks, and indeed, on behalf of President von der Leyen, she's following the situation very closely, and you've seen the statements she's made also on the importance of the fundamental rights being respected and the votes being counted and published accurately. Thank you. Next question, we have Philippe. Sorry, follow-up?
Just a quick follow-up there for Peter. But have you been in touch with Lithuania, with Vilnius, to actually see that Tikhanovskaya is, in fact, has fled Belarus and right now is on EU territory?
Again, there are many contacts ongoing, many contacts planned, many contacts have been made. I would not go into the details because this is a developing situation, and part of forming the assessment or part of conveying and forming the European Union's position is constant outreach to all the necessary partners. And it's very obvious that the EU member states among themselves are basically in touch on a regular basis, even more so in such specific situation like we are facing now with Belarus.
Thanks. So now we move to Philippe. Your microphone is not on the right source. Perhaps we will take Tomasz now and you will sort out your microphone in between. Tomasz, please.
Yeah, that's Tomasz Bielecko, Gazeta Wyborcza, to Deutsche Welle on Belarus. Peter, when do you expect this statement on behalf of 27 member states? Is it about today or for coming days? This is my first question. The second one, yesterday's statement carefully omitted the issue of sanctions. Even though this prospect was raised by by EPP family in the European Parliament already yesterday, so the question is whether the sanctions issue is being discussed now, and what would be your recommendation as a European Commission and the High Representative. And the third question: the foreign affairs ministers of Lithuania, Poland, and Ukraine declared already yesterday the readiness to facilitate the internal dialogue in Belarus. Would you see any EU institution role in such case to support such efforts? Thank you.
Thank you, Tomasz. On your first question regarding timeline for the EU27 declaration, we hope, of course, as soon as possible, but what needs to be taken into account is that we really need to have a proper assessment of the situation. You know how restricted the flow of information was and still is in and from Belarus. And when the EU27 declaration would be agreed, then we will publish, of course. I mean, this is at least the aim of the High Representative, as he stated in his tweet. He is working now to have the EU27 declaration on the situation in Belarus as soon as possible. On the second and third question on the possible sanctions and facilitation, I think all this was covered already yesterday in the statements, especially in the joint statement by High Representative Borrell and Commissioner Varhelyi, where they stated that we will continue, and the EU will continue to closely follow the developments in Belarus and assess how to further shape the EU's response to what is going on in Belarus. So this is an ongoing process where the member states need to have the full assessment, full clear picture of the situation, exchange of the views, and then agree on how we are going to react. Again, ongoing process, it's in the interest of everyone to have the results as soon as possible, but this is such a serious situation that really needs a profound discussion among the member states. So no one is in a rush for the sake of speaking now about retaliatory measures or sanctions. Anything is on the table, anything is possible as long as the member states agree. But first we need to have these consultations, these discussions among the member states, finalized, the assessments being concluded, and then everything will be then taken step by step. I mentioned already that the foreign ministers of the EU member states will be meeting in Berlin for the Gymnich, for their informal discussions. There is clear timeline for these. There are clear sequence. There is a clear sequence of steps, and it will be up to the member states to come up with suggestions what they would like to see, and then it will be up to them to agree the most appropriate response by the EU to the very dramatic and unfortunate events in Belarus.
Thanks. Nous avons Christian. On va essayer avec Philippe.
We'll try Philip to see if his microphone is working now. Philip?
Oui, voilà.
Is it working now? Okay. First of all, hello. Hello, Peter. Hi. About the prospect of sanctions, could you give us an update of the situation today and the possibility of having additional EU sanctions? And a more general question for Vivian. Is the Commission planning in the context, and this was mentioned, I think, 2 years ago, to finally activate the passerelle clause with regard to sanctions due to the lack of respect of human rights? This could help to deblock the situation, perhaps. Thank you.
Merci, Philippe.
Thanks, Philippe. I don't want to speculate on sanctions or the possibility of sanctions in the future. As I already said, we're going to discuss, analyse, and then decide on the situation and the appropriate response to the situation in Belarus. You know that in the past there were many sanctions against Belarus due to the political repression and the repression of the population and the failure to respect fundamental freedoms. Since 2016, we did see an improvement in the relationship between the EU and Belarus. We lifted a number of sanctions, although some are still in place. It is something that the EU continues to evaluate regularly. The member states do so as well. I can't exclude, nor indeed confirm, any actions that the EU will take in response to the situation in Belarus. Concerning the vote with the qualified majority, I'll get back to you later about that. The previous Commission did indeed make a number of recommendations on this point that were discussed in the Council, but I'll get back to you on that. Now over to Christian.